Let me begin by telling you a little bit about myself and about my political history, which is very different, I think, than most folks in the United States Senate. I started off my life living in Brooklyn, New York. You all have heard of that town south of here. And my dad was a paint salesman, and that's what he did his whole life. He came to America from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. And he didn't end his life with a lot more than that. He worked very hard, never made a whole lot of money. But it turned out, not being very political, we were not a political family, he ended up, I perceived as I grew older, how much he loved this country. And he loved this country because it gave him the freedom to raise two kids. He never didn't graduate high school, but his kids graduated college, and that was a pretty big deal in our family. And he had financial security in the sense that he always had a job, never any money, but he had a job. And that meant something to somebody who started off without any money. I went to the state of Vermont just about 50 years ago, which was the best decision I ever made in my life. That was great. And in the early 1970s, I ran for statewide office. Senator Winston Proudest, some of you may remember him, he had passed away. There was a special election, and I contested that election. And I ran really hard all over the state, and on election day, I ended up with 2% of the vote. But I was a persistent guy, and I wasn't going to give up in one election. Then we had the regular election in '72, and I ran on a third party, and I got 1% of the vote. Still not being the smartest guy in the world and not knowing when to quit, came back and ran for Senate again, and I got 4%, and I ran for governor of Vermont in '76, I think, and got 6% of the vote. And then I did figure out that was enough. That was enough. All right, I got a clue, all running on a third party without any money. But then back in 1981, a friend of mine came up to me, and he said, you know, there's a race for mayor in Burlington where I lived. And Burlington, as you all know here in New Hampshire, is the largest city in the state of Vermont. Has only 40,000 people, but it is our largest city, beautiful city. And he said, you know, I'm looking over the election results from the last time you ran, he said, and while you only got 6% of the vote statewide, you got 12% in Burlington, and there were some low-income and working-class wards where you got more than that. You got 12%, you got 14%. And maybe you should run for mayor. So we got some people together, and we thought about it. And I decided to do it, running as an independent. And I was taking on, at that point, back in 1981, an incumbent mayor who had served 5 terms. And nobody thought that this Democratic mayor was, that one could beat him. And the point that I want to make is not only that I won the election by all of 10 votes, to everybody's great shock. That was after the recount. It was 14. It went down to 10. But that how we won that election became a political lesson that has stayed with me for my whole life. Nobody thought that we had a chance. And what we did is we put together a coalition. You all know what coalition politics is about. It's kind of an old phrase, not much in vogue now. But what we did is we said to the low-income people in the city who did not think they were getting a fair shake in terms of city services, we're going to stand with you. In fact, I did press conferences on low-income housing projects. And we talked to the union workers who work for the city, and AFSCME and the police union and the fireman union. We said, look, you're working hard. You deserve a fair shake in terms of contract negotiations. And we talked to women who had never had an opportunity to get into City Hall at that time, and we said, we're going to open the door to everybody, working people, low-income people, and women. You're not represented in City Hall. We're going to do that. And we talked to the environmentalists in the community who were concerned about a number of projects that were anti-environmental. And we put together this strange coalition. And it was so strange, I often worried what would happen if we got them all in the same room at the same time. Because they were very different people. But they had the belief that we should open the doors of government, that we should allow everybody in, that government should not just work for the downtown and the big money interest, but it should work for all people. And we won that election. We won that election by 10 votes. Now, I am very proud of what I accomplished as the mayor of Burlington. I think many of you have been to Burlington. It's a great city. But of all of my accomplishments as mayor, and of all of the many accomplishments that I'm proud of, that I did when I was in the House and that I'm doing in the Senate, probably at the very, very top of that list is one that most people, most media people would think is irrelevant. But here's what that accomplishment was. We doubled voter turnout from 1981 to 1983. Now, how did we do that? And what is that lesson for today? What exists all over America today is that millions and millions and millions of people, working people, low-income people, young people, they look at the political process and they say, not for me. I don't know what these guys are doing, but it sure is not relevant to my life. And no, I am not going to vote. And so we have millions of people who don't vote. Or we do have other people who go into the polling booth, they hold their nose, and they vote for what they perceive to be the lesser of two evils. Or we have other people who will vote for this or that issue. Somebody will get them going on this issue or that issue. But what we did in Burlington, and it's the lesson that I've never forgotten, is that if, in fact, you listen to what people have to say and what they need, and you do your best, and it's hard, and you're not perfect, and you make mistakes, and you can't always do everything you want. But if people know you are listening to their needs and you fight for them, you know what? They participate in the political process. They come out to vote. And we ended up winning in Burlington. We took on Democrats, we took on Republicans, and we ended up winning 2-1 in the low-income and working-class wards of the city. And that lesson has always stayed with me. How, in fact, do you make government relevant to all of the people in a democratic society? How do you involve people in the process? How do you stand up and fight for ordinary Americans?